I've been asking the questions. I'm sure you guys have lots of questions. Let's have a show of hands whilst I ask the minister. Show of hands, and then when you've had the mic, we'll come to you. Minister, the rise in costs, rise in prices have eroded people's take-home pay. You have got a budget coming up in 6 months. Any likelihood of a tax break that will make sure that people have more money in their back pockets?
Yes, I'm likely to do that in 3 weeks, actually. I'm going to announce a supplementary budget during the midterm review on the 31st of July. We agreed that yesterday, and I intend to increase the threshold for income tax to give people relief. We're definitely going to do.
So that's the only good news you've delivered this session.
Well, this is a year of austerity. In a year of austerity, there is likely to be more tougher news than very good news, unfortunately. That's the nature of the...
So we're going to get a tax break?
Yes, I'm bent on that. So again, we're trying to find the right threshold so that we don't lose too much revenue, but give enough relief to those who are...
On the corporate side? Any tax breaks on the corporate side?
On the corporate, not just yet. I think the corporate side, I'll look at that at the year end, not in 3 weeks' time.
Okay. Yeah. We've got people with questions. Do they have mics, please? If you could identify yourself, name and who you represent, and ask your question, please.
My name is Doug Manatsi. I'm from DBF Capital Partners. Honorable Minister, unpack the numbers for me. Your budget was done on RTGS halfway through, a quarter way through, the exchange rate goes haywire. Now, maybe come back a little bit, you've got interbank market. What are your numbers? How real are your numbers? And how real is your surplus? In other words, I'm glad you say you've got an interim fiscal interim statement in end of this month. Some of us are struggling to understand the numbers. Reserve Bank says 1.3 billion RTGS, 1-point-something billion Nostros. There seems to have been some reverse seigniorage at some point when 1-to-1 ran for too long, yet you are subsidizing some numbers. Where on whose balance sheet is that sitting? Is it Reserve Bank or is it Treasury? Because when you were running the 1-to-1, as you agreed, it took much longer than you had intended for that for that policy to change. Who was taking the loss and on whose balance sheet is that sitting? So I'm just confused with the numbers, but maybe you can unpack them for me.
Minister, can you help us with the numbers? I think let's take the questions one at a time.
Thank you, Mr. Mnatsi, for that question. And I should say Douglas for that question. Yeah, it's much easier to Mr. Mnatsi. So basically, I'm happy to share the numbers with you. These are now public. I made them public when I issued a State of the Economy statement to Parliament about a month ago. So everything has been converted to domestic currency. So the first order of business was to convert the macroeconomic figures. So GDP, so right now, if you look at the gross domestic product, for year end, we were sitting at, in US dollar terms, we're sitting at 25 billion US dollars. If you convert that to Zim dollars, I've moved from RTGS to full Zim dollars domestic currency, it's actually 43 billion Zim dollars. This is the GDP figure at the end of 2018. We've already done the conversion. In fact, we're working backwards now to do the conversion all the way back up to 2009 because we need the history. We know how to do the conversion. That's not a problem. So we've recalibrated the entire economy in domestic currency at the end of 2018, and then we move on from there. So if you look at where we will be by year end in terms of projection, just the size of GDP, we're looking at 70 billion Zimbabwe dollars. Right? But I'll make this available to you. Now we've recalibrated the growth in money supply. All the monetary figures have all been converted. And then you'll see it when we issue the midterm review statement. And in doing so, we have worked closely with the IMF so that it is consistent with international standards. And they agree with our figures completely. In fact, recently you must have seen that Zimbabwe is now officially, or rather, I think it was confirmed actually,
By the World
I have
Bank.
to say by the World Bank, that we're a lower middle income country. And this is based on those figures. So yeah, we're a lower middle income country in the same category as Ghana and Senegal, just to name a couple of countries in Africa that in fact are doing well. And I tell you, on that day, when we received the information, World Bank, I got a call from one of the rating agencies. I won't say which one. Said, Minister, it's about time you looked into getting a credit rating because Senegal and Ghana are favorably rated. How about you? And so I said, let's talk about it. So they're coming to see me next week. So now the second part of the question is about who's bearing the loss in terms of subsidies and so forth. The loss is always ends up in Treasury, and that's what happens. So the central bank carries it in what you call some kind of running profits and loss account, but eventually Treasury has to take it on. I'm fully aware of what it is, and we've taken it into account in terms of our domestic debt. But the upside, Douglas, is that when we change the currency, actually our domestic debt went down. So that was helpful. I'm not going to complain about that. It's a technical phenomenon, but it's the one that you want on your side, you know. But also the rebasing of the GDP in the first place also assisted. So if you look at our debt figures, it's actually not bad. It's about, overall debt is now 53% of GDP. That's very good. So we're not in bad shape at all.
Thank you.
But all the detail of the numbers, I'm happy to give you what I have now. It's public information. So
maybe
you get more at the end of the month.
On that question, on that issue, Minister, the criticism is, why don't we have regular data coming from your ministry and from RBZ? Why don't we have monthly numbers from your ministry, weekly numbers from RBZ about trading in the interbank and so forth, so that we as a market can decide based on credible data?
Well, we have been getting monthly figures from Treasury. It's on our website in terms of these numbers, the numbers that Douglas asked for. They're available. Every month we are now releasing information on the state of the deficit, surplus. Everything is in there. In terms of the weekly figures from the central bank, again, because we've been fine-tuning the market, these will eventually come through. You'll see more regular.
Okay. Thank you, Minister.
Updates,
there's a hand. There's a couple of hands, 3 hands. We'll try and get through all of the hands. Who's got a mic, please? If you've got a mic, stood up.
Yes.
Oh, right. Yes, Blessed.
Yes. My name is Blessed Mhlanga. I'm with Heart and Soul TV. Minister, fuel is selling right now at $5.32, but the interbank rate where the fuel players are getting their money is now around $8 against the Zim dollar. So is there a subsidy on fuel, or fuel has just gotten cheaper? Because if you look at the map, it's probably selling at 60 cents. And if there's a subsidy, can government afford this subsidy in the long term? Because it appears that the RBZ said now all the guys in the petroleum sector should get their money from the interbank rate. And now that it has gone up, is the the price of fuel likely to also increase?
Thanks, Blessed. Minister. A very good question. It's linked to what Douglas asked earlier. Yes, indeed, the price of fuel is likely to go up. I think really what would be ideal is a price that close to an equivalent of $1 per liter. Yeah, now that's ideal. It's global. If you look around the region, that's the average. That's the ballpark. So we'll also get there, but we don't want to get there in a big bang. It has to be gradual rather than in a big bang. As long as we're able to hold the exchange rate. As I said, in terms of managing our affairs as government, we are doing that. We're doing everything we can. But of course, there's sentiment out there to move the currency whichever way, frankly. But you will see the fuel price adjust to equilibrate towards that $1, but gradually, absolutely. There is an implicit subsidy to the economy. I'm also aware that the arbitrage opportunities that were there before have come back. I wonder now whether, people again are starting to sell fuel in Zambia. You come drive a truck here, fill up in Zimbabwe.
So
Maybe
we
with
might
a bit
need
of
to deal with
corruption.
that quickly.
Yeah, with a bit of corruption in the borders, the fuel ends up in Zambia, Mozambique, or elsewhere. It happens. People will take advantage of these arbitrage opportunities. But we want to tighten the management of fuel. We are going to launch an electronic dipstick, basically some technology which allows us to monitor the fuel usage fuel station by fuel station. It's called Matsimba technology. We've been testing it just behind the government house where the president sits, the CMED garage. It's working, and my staff tell me, they're sitting in and say, how many times it's working. So we want to roll it out now.
When are you going to roll it out?
The next 1 month. We have to.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to. We just finalizing budgets on how to do it. Just a better monitoring of that usage. But you're right on the pricing. We have to deal with the price, but gradually. As long as we hold the exchange rate, I think we'll be able to manage it.
Fantastic. At least you're doing something about it. Tommy Stolia, I see your hand. I see Carol White's hand. Yeah.
Good morning, Minister. I am a media person, and I just wanted to find out, do you have a media advisor in your ministry, and to you personally? And I'm not going to ask the name. The second thing, I'm glad you said that you've been slow in taking to solar power. But what have you done? The most expensive thing in applying solar to your house are the batteries and the panels. They are out of the reach of anybody. They are incredibly expensive. What about removing tax on them? And also bringing in solar cars and saying, for the next 2 years or 3 years, no tax on those cars. But I know people in the townships who really go all the way to Botswana, smuggle batteries and panels because they cannot afford them here. They are expensive.
Okay.
Two very good questions. A media advisor, I tried before. Not successful on that front. So I had to restart. I'm hiring a media advisor. Actually, we've now just shortlisted 3 individuals. So in the next 1 month or 2, we should have someone in place. That's right. No, but also we need a social media, dedicated social media group of young people sitting in a room drinking Coca-Cola all day, watching the screens and tweeting, and we need that. We need that. Social media now drives main media. If it becomes main media in a way, so we're working on that. But I think you're raising a point when you say, do you have a media advisor? Because we're doing so much. We can't even cope with communicating it. We're not communicating it well enough. Those are the facts. I'll be the first to admit that. And so we need a
So the
strategy.
headline tomorrow is Minister admits he's not communicating well.
Well, I don't know. But maybe you should read media, commits to help the minister communicate better.
That's a better headline.
I think that's really Then on the second question on solar, again, I'm very passionate about the solar issue, and I think to me there's something there. You're right, the cost of batteries, because you need to store the power, be able to use it when the sunshine is gone overnight. So removing taxes, we're looking at all of that just to make sure that we open up and reduce the cost of acquisition of solar panels and so forth. But as I say, there's also just big business for serious players to invest in solar farms and connect into the grid. But for your homes, surely we should just.
But why are you not committing, Minister, to removing the duties on solar panels and batteries so that we get on with this job?
It's a very good idea. It's very persuasive. But again, you must never make a policy announcement in an interview. So, but it's a very good idea.
Good. Yes,
Thank you very much. My name is Ashton Lowe. I'm unemployed but invested in a couple of companies, mainly in the mining services and food sectors.
Mining services, that's an interesting sector. Yes.
Minister, I would like to commend you on your initiatives and tenacity, but also follow up on what Tommy just said, to say one of the biggest problems at the moment is perceptions, managing perceptions. If I would be brave enough, we're not doing that very well. I think what we need to do is to say, this is where we were, this is where we'd like to get to, and this is the time it's going to take for us to get there. And communicate that effectively. And follow through on those commitments with solid action bound by timelines. The second thing that we have to do is to manage the perception around taking and embracing national problems at a national level. I'll give you an example. You spoke very eloquently about the patience that government has demonstrated, or government ministers and MPs have demonstrated, and how you are going to act this week on sorting out their cars. I don't know how much that's going to cost. But if you then juxtapose that against the 33 million that we owe to ESCOM, of which we paid 10 and didn't pay, it will work, it didn't work, it worked eventually, the 10 million. How do you think that is perceived against the background where the nation perceives that 23 million paid to ESCOM tomorrow would alleviate our electricity situation substantially? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Perception management, Minister, it's a big issue.
Managing perceptions is never easy, and it is not my job alone. Remember, I'm only one minister in government, albeit running a very important ministry. It's an overall responsibility of government to manage perceptions. And I agree with him, actually, that we have to communicate better in terms of this is where we were. I thought that's what I tried to do when I talked about the deficit, just using that as a lens. And then this is where we are now. Now we've eliminated it, and we want to carry on doing that. And then in terms of where we are going, we're very serious about Vision 2030. We believe that the ultimate goal is becoming that upper middle income country that would like to be enjoying. Others who have made it thus far. So we have a roadmap, we have a target, but we could do a better job of communicating that. I agree with you. But also sometimes when you are doing reforms, and just to talk about currency reform specifically, you can't communicate 100%, you communicate 50% because it's a sensitive issue. So while we know where the two steps we need to take, you can't say it too loudly and be open about it because it's a sensitive issue. And I think from now on we'll communicate better, because once we put this currency issue behind us, and I'm actually already feeling, at least for me, I've put it behind me, then we are focusing on issues around growth, development. We can communicate better because that is less sensitive. The issue you mentioned about ESCOM cars and so forth, that's exactly what I was trying to manage, the perception that we can't have shiny cars parked around Parliament when people are hungry, when inflation is raging the way it's doing. We need to manage those perceptions. But unfortunately, there will always be competing needs. Because I also know, Mr. Ndlovu, there are members of Parliament who are literally destitute. Their allowances have been eroded by inflation. They are taking, they are getting into combis to get to their constituencies, and the communities have no respect for them. And members of Parliament, they don't believe that these MPs could bring relief to their communities. If they can't bring relief to themselves, how can they bring relief to communities? So they also have serious perception challenges, and they earn very little. And sometimes you think, they earn very little. They have no.
Maybe they shouldn't be in Parliament, Minister. Maybe that's the thing. I think.
But at the same time, you need people like that to be in Parliament, because then they really understand the community issues.
Sure. Okay, Carol White.
Honourable Minister, my name is Carol White from Meikles Hospitality. The hospitality and tourism industry, as you are aware, is a huge currency earner, foreign currency earner, and communication is key. So when the currency, the Zim dollar currency, was announced, we were in a Zimbabwean contingent in London at Experience Africa in the middle of selling Zimbabwe. And our worry and concern was that we were totally in the dark about how to implement And I think that's always the key. Communication is one thing, but implementation is the other. And bureaus and exchange of currency when guests arrive in Zimbabwe is a problem as we speak. So we don't have a formal communication of how do they change currency at the airport. The hotels can't get RTGS. They have a mandate to change at reception, but they can't do it. So I implore you to please look with our Minister of Tourism on how do we communicate to the markets and how do we harvest this foreign currency before the local market go and exchange it.
Carol, I agree with you. You are in a very important sector. I love what the tourism sector does. This is low-hanging fruit for us, you know. Tourists show up and pay for their services and we earn foreign currency. And it's really a fast-growing sector in my view, and we should invest more in the sector in terms of hotel capacity. Sorry about what happened to you in London when we changed the currency. While we were out there marketing Zimbabwe, I know you did not have enough information as to how this was going to go, and we had the information here, and but that didn't help you. But you're right that we have to invest time in making sure that it is better understood by the players in the industry. We're going to do that. I'm meeting the Minister of Tourism soon for us to really map out all the areas. Yesterday we met with IATA because we have to keep the airlines flying. So we have to pay what we owe them. I won't tell you how much we owe IATA, by the way. But I've got the figure. I was like, oh, this is a big figure. But we're going to do that. So they continue flying to support that sector. So all these are critical sectors that we need to support. And as I said, I want to spend more time now focusing on those micro productivity areas than worrying about the macro, because I think that's under control in terms of fiscally what we need to do and also in terms of the monetary aspects. And also to go back to the love sector, which is mining, that's an incredible sector. We're expecting about $8 billion to be invested in that sector over the next couple of years. You know, I didn't know that we had lithium until I became minister. Zimbabwe has lithium. And two weeks ago, I learned we have rare earth minerals as well. And we may have the second largest deposit after China. I didn't know that. So the potential is amazing. Just the mining sector, the tourism sector. And in the infrastructure, we're not doing too badly either. If we have got the trunk roads, we've got Beitbridge, Harare, Chirundu, we have got Beitbridge, Bulawayo, and then Victoria Falls. In terms of if we just properly commercialize that, get proper PPPs, again, that infrastructure space is incredible. We've got the Batoka Gorge project coming through between GE and Chapao, China, $5.2 billion worth of investment. I could go on in terms of the micro aspect. There's just so much potential, so much that could take place and change the country. And tourism is one of them. We'll do everything to work with you and help you there.
Fantastic. Yes, Much Masunda. Mordecai, you want to ask a question too? Fantastic. Let's do that.
My name is Chade Ashton Masunda. I'm going to put a question to you, Minister, that is more related to the administration of justice in this country.
Justice, okay.
Yes. Because that's one of the key things that investors look for when they come in here, and this applies to both domestic and foreign investors. The dispensation of justice and the speed with which that happens. There's a very serious issue, Minister, that is well up your ministry street, and that is the snarl-up that has occurred in the Special Court for Income Tax Cases and the Fiscal Court of Appeal. Those two tribunals have not worked for the best part of the last 30 years. And the bottom line is that we've got a judge who's snowed under to a point where his health has been adversely affected. And what we need to do, and the Law Society, of which I'm one of the senior members, and the Institute of Chartered Accountants, has come up with a solution, a proposal which needs to be implemented with due speed. And that proposal simply says, in broad terms, we need to enlist the services of retired judges from, say, within the Commonwealth,
Right.
or the IBA, and Mordecai will support me on that score, and they have a situation that's not dissimilar to what we did with the advent of Uhuru in April 1980, where we had judges that came in here from Ghana, from
That's right.
Tanzania,
Caribbean,
from the UK,
yeah.
to come in and clear that backlog. We have a situation now where that judge in particular is being ridiculed, more recently by Luke Malaba, our Chief Justice. This is Samuel Gujga. What we need to do is to bring in all these people, clean up that case. There are over 30 cases where judgments have been reserved, because all these disputes over customs duties and import duties and all those things, they go to those tribunals.
That's right.
And we've got cases where VAT has not been reimbursed to companies because the judgments have not been handed down.
Okay.
And that's a very serious issue because it affects, it impinges on the perception that both local and foreign investors have about the rule of law in our country. Thank you.
Thanks much, Minister.
Frankly, I appreciate that. I wasn't fully aware of the acuteness of the issue in terms of the backlog, over 30 cases, one judge dealing with them, all the delays. I'll certainly look into that. Thank you for bringing it to my attention. To tell the truth, I wasn't aware.
Thank you.
That it was
That's the beauty
serious.
of this conversation,
I appreciate
surfacing these issues that move the nation forward.
But I think he's saying something more, which is just about the rule of law as well.
Sure.
I heard that message clearly, that we need to demonstrate as a country that we have a rule of law. People just walk in and take your property or whatever it is. That needs to be put in place. But also, I think psychologically for the international community is also dealing with this farmer compensation issue, which is also a property rights issue. And we're committed as government. It's in the 2013 constitution. We've been paying the vulnerable farmers. We have 737 of them who've registered to be paid from that small 53 million allocation in the budget. And I was more optimistic. I thought, Trevor, that by end of this month, we'd have concluded the grand agreement with the farmers. But I think we need one more month. There's still some fine-tuning to do, especially on the valuation side by government. The farmers are giving us
Can
their
I just
figure.
hold you there on the 99-year leases?
Okay.
Because the TSP actually says you're going to move with speed to ensure that the 99-year leases are bankable. What's holding us up there?
We need the bankers' help as well. I think in fine-tuning the document and agreement with government so that it is acceptable as you know that your security is there, your land is collateral and so forth. So we need the bankers' assistance on that in fine-tuning.
So you're willing to receive that assistance from the bankers?
We are willing. We are willing. I think we need to move with speed. Not I think we should move with speed. But we need the bankers' assistance to tell us what is acceptable. But we have to do it. So
Fantastic.
property rights, restoration. But I thank him for that contribution.
Thank you. Mr. Mahlangu Mordecai?
Thank you, Trevor. My name is Mordecai Mahlangu. I practice law in this town. Minister,
I suspect in this country too.
This is this town.
Yes, indeed. Just two things. First, if I can just add on to what Mush was saying about the tax cases. In most of those cases, tax has already been paid. And by the time they are concluded, the amount, if it's refundable, is absolutely no value. That's where the injustice is exacerbated.
Right.
But I was just going to ask about the farming issue and the compensation that you referred to. My question is this. In view of the fact that the bulk of those beneficiaries are people that are politically connected or they've benefited because of their politics, why is it that the taxpayer must pay that compensation without the individuals concerned making their own contribution? Where is the justice in that? Aligned to that is another issue which perhaps happened long before your time, but I think is also relevant. You might recall or had reports about an input scheme that was run by the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe, in terms of which a lot of farmers got all sorts of things given to them. Our understanding was that they were going to pay for those inputs. But subsequently, the debt was assumed by the state. I think you remember that. Once again, in an economy with all these difficulties, why is it that individuals who benefit personally are bailed out by the taxpayer who has absolutely no benefit in that? Where is the justice in that? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, again, it's two very good questions and comments. The delays in resolving tax cases, even the issues resolved by the time the person is refunded, the money is lost value. I agree with that. I think that's a capacity issue that needs to be dealt with from the judge's side, and we resolve these cases. I appreciate that. Now, the issue of tax justice, that now as taxpayers, we have to literally compensate the farmers indirectly in a way. Is there any justice in that? I think it's a fair comment. So as we think about the compensation mechanism, we should reflect on that. Shouldn't the beneficiaries also contribute as well as the taxpayers? I think that's a very good point, and I'm listening very carefully. But also, there's a way in which this could also be part of our negotiations for debt relief globally. We've already raised this, that because it's a global issue. The UK is involved, and so we're also thinking that direction. So you may find that the actual source of resources is going to be a multiplicity of sources, but we still need to sign the grand agreement. But what's important now is for us to sign the grand agreement, agree a figure. We acknowledge the debtors' government, which we've already done through the constitutional provisions, but reduce it down to a piece of paper. And then we have a figure, then maybe issue and kind of IOU, I don't know, 30 years and so forth. Then think of the payment mechanism, looking at these principles that you are raising. This issue about taking on debts, government bailing out schemes and other people. But by the way, generally, I'm very averse to debt assumptions. I made that very clear for parastatals, for anyone. I'm very averse to that. It's always a bad idea. It's actually bad finance, because debt is very good when it's sitting on a company's balance sheet. The management work harder; they have to pay the interest. So I'm averse to that. So yeah, it's not something that I would like to do a lot. Certainly under my watch, to assume debts. I'm aware of that issue where some input scheme didn't go so well, and then it was eventually assumed as part of government debt. I think you will see less and less of that going forward. I'm determined that we really implement sustainable debt management strategies, both for domestic and foreign debt, because if we don't, then we cannot, be recipient of a nice credit rating. We would like to have a credit rating. If you don't have proper sustainable debt over time, you cannot maintain a rating, neither can you get one. So I'm acutely aware of the implications of debt assumption and these bailouts, taxpayers bailing out bad schemes, and we want less and less of that. And we're determined to make sure that we shut the door on that.
Well, another debt assumption, Minister, the Reserve Bank has indicated that they are going to take over foreign legacy debt at 1-to-1, but the whole thing is as clear as mud. What's happening there?
I don't think they've said they will take over the debt.
What's the situation?
Unless the deputy governor wants to say something else. No, let's be clear. You see, these are just blocked funds. A government is not a party to the contracts that created these legacy debts. Let's be honest. What's happening is that you have, corporates that, are doing business here or come to do business here, and they have the RTGS, it's about Zim dollar in their accounts, and then they're trying to remit to outside that can't find the US dollars. That's not immediately a debt for the government. It is a debt for the company for sure, but the commitment from government is to assist in honoring those payments, in remitting those payments. And that's why we're thinking of maybe issuing some kind of ready bonds, some kind of payment scheme.
Do we have clarity at the moment, the timelines, the start and the end for that?
No, frankly, we don't as yet have clarity in terms of the scheme of arrangement that we make use of in paying out these. We're also learning from other countries, from Nigeria, from Egypt and others, at least in terms of Latin America, in terms of these ready bonds. But we're clear that the corporates need support.
Okay.
We're very committed to that.
The deputy governor.
Quantum,
You don't want to.
No,
you don't want.
He should not respond. I don't want to put him on this. It wouldn't be fair.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me be my headache for now.
Okay, all right. Only fair. All right, there's a hand there from...
Morning, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much for an enlightening discourse. I'm Tekla, I'm an ordinary Zimbabwean. My concern is regarding the ordinary Zimbabwean. As you are well aware, Honorable Minister, the buying power of the ordinary Zimbabwean is continued to deteriorate. And as government, what other mitigatory measures are you also putting in place to ensure that the livelihood of the ordinary Zimbabwean does not continue to deteriorate and the ordinary Zimbabwean is also able to put food on the table? And as government, are you also concerned about the general suffering of the ordinary Zimbabwean? Thank you.
Okay. I see you had to drink some water
Yes,
there,
I had
Minister.
to. No, because I'm very concerned about the suffering of ordinary Zimbabweans. I'm really, really concerned. And the issue really is inflation. What really happens is that when we unleashed this currency reform agenda and journey on the 1st of October last year, and we didn't tell you it was a currency reform journey because we couldn't tell you, that unleashed inflation, and that is the problem. So over time, what we're finding is that retailers were benchmarking price increase and price adjustments on the power rate. So at the same time, the economy was just US dollar rising. And that was a big issue. It still is an issue. So what have we done about it? I think you agree with me that at least for now, our decision to introduce a domestic currency as the sole legal tender within the borders has assisted in containing the power market, which was driving prices. And we are beginning to see some shops even begin to reduce prices. So what we're wrestling with, and I really thank you for that question, is how to deal with this power market phenomenon as a driver of prices. And I kept saying, you know what, I don't understand why, if milk is produced in Zimbabwe, why should there be 100% pass-through from the exchange rate to the final price at OKs and so forth? We know there are other inputs, but it should be 100% pass-through. So I'm just using milk because I couldn't think.
There's a milkman there who's going to stand up and...
It's not about milk, it's a general point about 100% pass-through. And economics really says that it shouldn't be like that. You only get 100% pass-through if the commodity is 100% imported, really. Or it needs 99% of inputs that are imported for it to be produced. So we have to deal with it, and that's just one way. But for civil servants as well, we are going to put in place a cushioning allowance. We did that in January. Between January and March, we allocated $63 million as a cushioning allowance. We've kept that, we didn't remove that. Then come 1st of April to year end, we did that adjustment of $400 million in terms of cost of living adjustment with $400 million. And what that did was, the lowest paid civil servant was now, it's still low by the way, is now at $600 a month, and that is low. And then we're going to do, as I said, this week we're negotiating, tough negotiation with civil servants. We're going to do another cushioning allowance. Who knows, we may do another one before year end. As long as we have the resources and we feel the pain of the people, and these government employees, we'll do something about that. If you look at those employed in the private sector, again, I've challenged the private sector, and I'm challenging you colleagues that please adjust salaries for employees. Do that. Let's make sure that everyone is uplifted. I'm not solving, by saying that, solving a problem for people who live in the rural areas, for sure. For rural areas, we are, as I said, talked earlier about feeding schemes, food assistance programs, that we always run as government during years of drought, cash transfers, but also our international partners, the donor community are also supporting us in that. In fact, we expect to receive this year about $600 million from outside to support the social protection initiatives. So we're trying our best. We know it's never enough. Our prognosis as government is that inflation will stay high until October visibly high, and then drop from that point onwards, because it's a simple technical phenomenon of the base. The base shifted in October last year to a higher base in terms of the CPI index, and so we expect that shrinkage. But we think that by year end, it will still be in double digit, but in the 30s. And that will be a major change from where it is now, from 100 to the 30s. That's our prognosis. But economics can be hazardous. When you project things, it comes out different. But that's our prognosis.
Okay, Mr. Manduanta? Sorry, oh dear, lots of questions. We've got 4 minutes to go. All right.
Thank you. My name is Douglas Otto from First Mutual. I've got a couple of questions. In the insurance sector, SI 142 now prohibits payment of premiums in US dollars or not, we don't know, but contracts normally run for more than just a month. We've entered a contract at the beginning of the year by announcement of the sister instrument. Can you or can you not, and we see the regulator issuing instructions that are contrary to some of the agreements that are in place in terms of the contract, and in fact the act itself allows transacting insurance business in US dollars. What's the position on that? I will get any clarification. Then there's the issue of the compensation for previous lost value.
Yeah, the 6 billion, yeah.
Second round now, from 2009 to now. And we keep on hearing that the people must compensate each other, but the value hasn't increased. Is government considering doing anything about the compensation, given that the Justice Smith Commission, in their own feeling, allocated 63% of the blame to government and the regulators?
Thank you for those beautiful questions.
No, those are very good questions. I really appreciate that. Those are really pertain to the contractual savings industry, which is very important for building the savings profile of the country. Now, on the issue of products which are contracted in US dollars, I've asked the commissioner, Ms. Mradzikwa, and the new board to really look into this issue, so that there is fairness in its resolution. So I'm waiting to engage them to see how far they're progressing. But it's urgent, and I agree with you that you contracted in US dollars because you were allowed to. And suddenly we're saying in Zim dollars, is it fair to you as the contractor and then the contractee, the beneficiary? We'll look into that. I'm sure we'll come to some understanding which is fair to all parties. Now, on the issue of compensation, the 6 billion odd, because of the losses that were incurred after the hyperinflation and then dollarization 2009, that also is an urgent issue. What really hampered us is that we did not have a board and then a commissioner, a substantive commissioner general. Now we do. I think in the leadership of both Mrs. Mradzikwa and Nduna, we have got, I think, 2 capable individuals who know this industry well. They will help us deal with this. But I think here, Otto, we have to meet halfway. That I think there's responsibility from the insurance sector, the contractual industry sector as well as government. So both sides need to come together and resolve this issue. There should be some acknowledgement of or contribution from both sides. Because what I keep hearing, and this might be wrong by the way, is that the insurance companies benefited from this. They took this and that funds that were for the benefit of clients, and they converted that to assets which are sitting on their own balance sheet. So they need to use all the properties they acquired. I keep hearing this kind of, I'm sure you've heard that kind of story. So I think let's unravel that. Let's see what the industry can contribute, how government can meet you halfway. But let's resolve the issue and put that behind us. Let's deal with what the Smith Commission.
Fantastic. I'm going to take one more question. Yes, from a lady.
Thank you for the conversation. I liked, Minister, what you were saying, that you want us to go back to being a normal economy. Now, in a normal economy, if I was holding US dollars, in whatever shape or form, and for example, if it was changed to rands, it couldn't be changed by just changing the sign, because there's a difference in exchange rate. And I would get, if the rate is 14, I would get 14 rands for each dollar.
That's right.
However, in Zim dollars, suddenly, whatever I was holding just became Zim dollar by changing of a sign, which has, for entities, so I'm talking from a corporate perspective, I'm also looking at individuals, but what it does is it erodes our balance sheets, our capital. We are now dividing that by 9, initially we had it held as US dollar. Now it's being held as Zim dollar, but on the same level. We haven't received any, there's no multiple applied to the changing into Zim dollar. However, I then have the legacy debt, which you have rightly said has not been transferred to the Reserve Bank. I'm sitting with it. So I'm sitting with it and I'm multiplying it by 9, whereas everything else is divided by 9. So I am insolvent, effectively. We have somehow rendered a lot of companies insolvent by what we have done. No one knows how they're going to actually settle their obligations. And because of that, if you are not able to settle your obligations, it means we also have service delivery issues where our suppliers are not giving us what we are supposed to get because we haven't settled previous obligations. I'm not sure what exactly the thinking is in government of how we're really going to deal with this, because we're going to get to another year end where we're going to have qualified financial statements. Again, we are not looking attractive as companies to invest in Zimbabwe, and we haven't really tackled that issue. And I also wanted to look at the cars issue from a different perspective. You've talked about the cars for the MPs and the ministers.
The cars, okay.
You've talked about that as their tools of trade. I actually agree with you. And yet you make it very difficult for companies, again, to buy a car. The duty is so punitive now. Yet it is a tool of trade. People need cars for certain activities. It's not just a single cab that is required for certain activities. So I think we also need to relook at the duty on those cars. And when you talk about not on my watch, I think it should be not on government's watch. Because for me, if it means that I must have fear if you leave your office, does it mean everything is gonna come crumbling down again? That concerns me. I want to know that in government we have consistency, we have continuity, we have, a succession plan, we have things that are consistently done. Not that only if you are there, we're actually going to see some progress.
Thanks, Valerie, for that powerful question. Yes, Minister?
Let me start with the last point. No, when I mean not on my watch, I really mean government's watch. I act on behalf of government. Please don't get the impression that things will change when I leave. I expect them to change, but for the better, So please bear with me on that one. But on the issue of balance sheet, I'm actually concerned about that. I agree with you. I remember when we were adopting the SMP and having negotiations with the IMF, one of the things that had concerned us was exactly that the balance sheet of banks as we transition from US dollars to a domestic currency. So I agree with you, it is having an impact. But again, that's what happens every time when a country changes its currency or when we have a devaluation. That's exactly what happens. Balance sheets get devalued. It can be painful. It can be painful.
What's going to be done?
I'll need to reflect on that in terms of whether a government can do anything. Together we can do something.
Maybe
I have not fully reflected on that.
Maybe an engagement with the Institute of Chartered Accountants to put a
engage
position to the minister?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I know it's an issue. It's an issue.
Minister,
She's right.
let me thank the audience. As you can see, this is a quality audience. Selected so that we have a very intimate conversation. No subject. We're not going to shy away from any subject, and that helps us bridge whatever differences that we have. I'm sure the minister is walking away today with a lot of homework on the issues that have been raised by members of the audience. We will be back again in August with another powerful person to come and engage with us. Minister, my parting shot to you is you've been in charge now for 10 months. Is there anything that you would want to do differently? Is there anything that you have done that you would want to change?
What I want to change is really communication. Is to communicate better, and I agree with that. It has been raised in other forums. You need to deal with communication. I think that is very, very critical.
Right.
That's one thing I need to deal with.
Right. On that note, we will end, and thank you so much, everybody.